welcome to another episode of our podcast, Third Eye Sister Souls. My name is Aurora, and this is Monique. And
Hi.
Monique has some very interesting stories to share about her experiences with the paranormal. And we even have a couple of pictures to show you that she managed to take during one of these events. So, Monique, take it away.
Okay. My entire life, while I did have some of the ET experiences, as many of you know who are experiencers, ETs a lot of times are more subtle with their approach to us as
Mm,
opposed to paranormal, where it's much
really?
more flat out. Yeah.
Now, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I at least that's been my experience, and it tends to be a lot of people's. That a lot of times when you talk to someone, they'll be like more familiar to say, "Oh yeah, I saw a ghost once," or my grandmother
Well,
knew she was dying and she was seeing this figure, and you know what I mean? But you
yeah.
don't hear so much about with ETs, and I think the reason is the ETs are also trying to be careful because
Okay.
of they've already got the attack meters on them from the military and stuff. So
Right. Right. That makes sense. And you know what? You
they,
are right. I've seen a ghost, if that's what it was, but I haven't actually seen an ET in the physical where this thing, and I'll tell the story in a little bit because it's my one and only quote unquote
nice.
paranormal story.
Oh,
So I'll
I'd
share
love to
that.
hear it.
I'll share that in a little bit. But you know what?
Oh
I
no,
do
that's
agree with you that the ETs are more subtle because, like I said, I saw this thing with my eyes where I haven't seen an ET like standing in front of me, or usually I
same.
don't. Yeah,
Same. Even though I had all that experience with the orange ebens, the smell,
yeah,
the buzzing, because my sister heard the buzzing, and so it wasn't even just me. My sister, the one who I didn't even hear the buzzing, and she heard the buzzing, but I didn't physically see them. Of course, it was pitch black in my room, so
yeah.
that could have something to do with it. But I think the reason is too is because humans are so hostile, and
That's a good point.
a lot of ETs that are trying to connect with us, communicate with us, are benevolent, and they can't even process the mindset that humans have with this whole violent aggression, and
Oh
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
I know. I mean, it's like people who are even humans who are sensitive. You walk in a room and you feel the tension or the anger or whatever's going on in that place, and it's actually physically
Exactly.
uncomfortable.
And it's
And
off-putting.
yeah,
And I think that if say an ET wants to make contact with you, but the environment is all chaotic and everything, well, they want
yeah.
to, they don't want to stay. That doesn't feel good to them. They're used to the place of what feels good and feels
Oh
natural. And
yeah.
unfortunately,
I
humans were
mean,
not natural.
I want to head back out the door if I walk in someplace where there's too much tension. So, yeah,
Same.
that makes sense. That totally makes sense. All right, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I had a
No, no,
thought.
no. That's totally fine. You didn't interrupt. You've made some very valid points. Exactly, your reaction is exactly what is to be expected. But it started out for me, uh, gosh, from I grew up in a haunted house.
No way.
I, yeah, I did. I think it happens to a lot of intuitives. Is it the house or is it it's just because we're sensitive to it?
Oh,
Because I have had it pretty
interesting.
much stuff since I throughout my entire life, no matter where I've lived. But
Ah, okay.
the onset of it, the real onset of it, was this house I lived at in Miami. I actually talk about this in the book I'm writing of my life. And we had incidences where, well, what happened was, believe it or not, I actually have memories of me from when I was very, very little. I don't know how I have these memories, but I can remember like at 2 years old,
Oh, wow. Okay.
which is like most people can't remember at 2 years old. Very faint memories, but I do remember because we moved into the second house in Miami when I was probably going on 4. I wasn't quite 4 yet, but it was, we lived in the first house and there was no kind of, it felt nice and peaceful. I
Okay.
remembered the energy there. I remember, uh, it's funny. I always get this memory brought back up in my head from a certain someone who gets a kick out of it on the other side.
Yeah.
Just thinks it's so cute when I was little. So he's chuckling a lot
Uh-huh.
about it because I do it to this day and I don't know why. But I was in that house, the first house, and there's actually a picture of me, but I actually remember that and sitting on I planted myself on the table
Mm-hmm.
because I was very little and the table was low. This was 1970s styles
Right.
homes. And I had this, there was a leftover, my parents had a party the night before, and there was a bowl of popcorn that had not been finished.
Uh-huh.
And I had certain types of kernels or popcorn that I liked, right? That I
Right.
enjoyed. So I sat on the table with this bowl of popcorn and I remember this and eating it. And for some reason, I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic here, but this is going somewhere with all this with the first house and the energy and all that.
Yeah.
And that memory is always being reminded to me because I think that my special someone on the other side
Uh-huh.
gets a kick out of it. So every now and then
Because
likes
you
to
were so
remind me of that
adorable.
because yeah, because I still eat popcorn this way. I like the
Oh.
half kind of
Half
it's not
popped?
all the way popped.
Really?
And those are like my favorite pieces, the way they taste.
Interesting. Oh, wow. I would have
and
never thought.
so and so I'm sitting there picking through it. And so he'll always kind of laugh. You remember when you did this?
Yeah. Oh, that's cute. That is cute.
So I think that's one of his favorite memories of me of being a little girl. And but anyways, the house, it was pretty peaceful. I remember just very normal childhood kind of things. Uh, and then I'm moving from this beautiful energy, beautiful place. And I didn't know, I mean, we just up and moving into this second house. This is Miami, Florida, and the second house. And I can remember as a little girl, this moment I walked in the house, I felt a very unsettled, uncomfortable feeling. And we're talking when I'm little. I'm like
Wow.
barely even 4 years old. Okay. But
Yeah.
I feel this energy. I knew something was off about this house.
And nobody else in your family felt that? Or said anything about it?
Not until, no, they didn't. Not right off the bat. Not that I'm aware of. It didn't happen until experiences started happening to everybody in the house.
Oh. Oh, okay.
Everybody except my dad, who didn't believe in any of this. My dad
Interesting.
was just,
Maybe he
yeah.
just didn't notice. Or he dismissed it
Yeah,
with
well,
some.
I think he refused. I don't know if it was that he was afraid to
Mm,
acknowledge any of it. So he just always, or he'd poo poo it about, you know what I mean? I
okay.
have to put my hair up. I was trying to have
That's
it down
okay.
for
Yeah,
this, but I'm
it's
outside
really
in the
warm
pergola and it's
outside.
hot.
Yeah, it's warm outside. I know it's going to be really hot today.
So if my hair looks like El Crapo, that's why.
You look adorable.
Thanks.
You look like a fairy with your pig hair. I love it. You
My
look
pink
so
hair.
cute. You do.
An overheated fairy.
Yeah, we normally do this earlier in the day, but today it just worked out
It's
this way.
okay. Hey,
Anyhow,
it's Saturday. We have a right to. I mean, yes, guys, we are pre-filming this. This is not coming out till Tuesday, but we had to film it on Saturday because I am not going to be around on Tuesday. I'm doing stuff with the family on Tuesday. We're supposed to go to Magic Kingdom, but um, I'm going to do my best because my shoulder is still hurting so much. So, but I'll make it. I'll
it
find
is
a way
what
to
it
make it work.
is. Yep.
Yep. It is what it is. There's always something,
Yeah.
especially when you get to this age. So anyway, so I remember that and feeling very uncomfortable. And then because it's not that I don't feel like every spirit or whatever that was coming through was bad. Definitely don't get that feeling at all. In fact,
Okay.
I can tell you that my two imaginary friends,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
I am very certain to this day they were not imaginary, especially the names and all
Yeah.
that I got from it. But they were pretty benevolent. But, you know, I kind of wonder if we didn't have like a portal thing going on in the house
Oh.
because all of us were seeing different, we're having different experiences with different beings in there.
Interesting.
So, yes, and including, and it's funny because I know my dad would hear these things, but he didn't want to. I think, like I said, I think it was fear. You know, it's funny. I
Mm.
think that is, and believe me, I'm not trying to stereotype with men here, so I don't want men to get. But I think there's a lot of men who are just, you know, because they're the ones who are supposed to be, you know, the strong ones or
Right.
whatever. Which you know,
Yeah.
women are strong too, but that's the old,
The
you know,
foundation of the family, it all
the
sort of
old
builds on them.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the old thought
Especially back in the
system was that.
70s.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, especially back in those days, uh, most men would right away want to be out of, I think, feeling, you know, afraid of something that, you know, they couldn't like physically defend their
Okay.
family over.
Well, that makes sense. Plus, it's a fact that women are overall more sensitive to
To
things like
feeling
that
things.
than
Yeah.
men. So that makes sense what you're saying. But the fear thing really does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, because how do you protect your family with something that you can't see?
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I do believe very much that my dad knew these things were going on, but I think he thought as long as he ignored it,
Okay.
they would maybe stop or dissipate, you know?
So he was in
So
denial, swimming around in
exactly.
denial.
Exactly. Now, it's funny because I heard some things that I didn't know about until I started writing my book on my own life.
Yeah.
And that this part I knew about because I've heard my family talk about, because remember I was really little at the time. um, but we would be we had a Florida porch,
Mm-hmm.
but Miami back in those times it wasn't as built up, so there was always like a natural breeze, and you could actually get away without having the air conditioner on. You could
Oh,
just have
wow.
your ceiling fans and your fans going. I don't know if we had ceiling fans at the time because I don't know if they had ceiling fans then. I don't know, but we had fans,
Yeah.
and with the natural breeze and that, it was comfortable. Not like this, where I'm like,
Yeah, well, climate change is,
yeah. And
there to
and we're
some
living
degree.
in inland more, and Miami is
Mm.
more towards the coast, so there
Yeah,
is
that
more
makes
of a
a big
breeze.
difference. Yeah, that does.
So anyway, so we'd be sitting out there at night having our dinner because the kitchen, it wasn't a tiny kitchen, but it was like a horizontal, so it was kind of narrow, and it would have been hard to have like a full
Yeah.
place setting for a family. So we had a big table set out on the Florida porch, and we would have our dinner out there. And when we'd be having dinner, all of a sudden they would hear it was my brother and my mom and I guess my older sister and all that. Like I said, I was younger at the time, and they would hear, sounded like in the living room, all of a sudden someone was taking a ball and throwing it on the ceiling. Like you're
What?
Yeah. Now I thought it was footsteps on the roof, but they said no, it was sounded like a ball hitting the ceiling in the living room.
Huh.
And this would happen like almost every night. And then they would go run in there, maybe not every night, but it happened often. But there would be nothing there. So that was the first sign that,
Interesting.
yeah, that was the first sign that something odd uh,
How
was with
long
this house.
how long after you moved in did you start to like hear things? Or your family actually started to be
Um,
aware? Because clearly you kind of knew what was going on from the get go.
I had the more visual things. That's the funny thing.
Okay.
I don't think I'm so much an audio person even to now. I'm a visual.
Yeah.
I'll see physical manifestations, which is worse.
So
It's
how when
one
did
thing
that start? Like
back then when I was
yeah.
very little. And
When you moved in
I
the house,
re
I mean. After you
what's
moved
that?
I was wondering after you moved in the
Oh,
house, how soon
it
did
was pretty soon because
okay.
I would have these wonderful dreams, but then I would have these nightmares that would freak me out. So that tells me that there was different
Okay.
energies in the house. But I remember too, um, my farthest memory was that I can physically remember. That's when the sleep paralysis started. Like I'm sure it probably happened before
Oh.
then,
Okay, but you don't remember.
or
Or maybe it
at
wasn't
least
traumatic.
it might not have started actually until we were in that house because I really don't remember in the house that I felt the beautiful warm energy. And that doesn't mean that all sleep paralysis is bad, but I
Yeah.
think that I still think there was some kind of portal or something in that house we lived in. And so that is what um, would cause all these experiences because you're going to have different,
Yeah, that's a
not just
trip. Wow.
humans, but you're going to have everything going in and out of
Huh.
these portals. In fact, the my first ET experience that I remembered happened
So
when I was living in that house.
so it wasn't just like one or two ghosts that would or whatever
Right,
spirits or whatever that would
right.
bother everybody with the same kind of patterns. It was like an influx of a variety of different things. Well, I can see
Yes.
why you'd say there was a portal there. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, because it
Dang.
was all different kinds of things. And then I just recently learned about this, but my brother had mentioned that it freaked the whole family out. We had a room that was, my grandmother was staying in it for a little bit, but I guess then she moved in with her sister, my aunt. And so they converted it into a den.
Mm-hmm.
And, but the door suddenly slammed so hard to that room that it made the entire house shake.
Holy cow.
And it freaked everybody out.
Oh,
But
I'm
again, I was so
sure.
little. Yeah. So I
Wow.
just recently discovered that while I was writing this book
Oh,
and
and you
learning
when you
about that.
remembered as you're writing the
Yeah.
book, you're remembering things. That makes sense.
Well, I didn't remember. This was what I was told. I didn't know anything
Oh,
about it.
okay. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
But so it just goes to show that it wasn't just me having experiences,
Right. Right.
but I feel on a whole, it was me in the end that was getting, you know, like I said, I
You were
guess
the
because the others kind of just
yeah. You mean you were the
leaned away
focus?
from it.
You were the focus of their attention of whatever spirits were
And
drifting
that's
through
probably
there.
because I paid more attention to them.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I was the
Okay.
only one that had these two imaginary, what we call imaginary friends that I just wholeheartedly would talk to. And I used to freak my family out because I remember them saying that I would be totally asleep and I was have these conversations going on and
Oh,
I'm just sitting
wow.
there talking away and kind of freaked them out.
In your sleep. Wow.
Yeah, that was from my understanding, anyways, that it kind of freaked them out. I don't know. Maybe they'll deny it today, but that was from my
Okay.
understanding. I remember at the time. I remember being woken up, and them telling me, "Oh, you were talking all the way, all this stuff in
Okay.
your sleep," you know, and that. So I do remember that. Then my brother was freaked out because he said he kept seeing a heavy woman in with a shopping cart in his closet,
What?
and yeah, and he thought maybe
Holy
she
cow.
was evil. I really don't think she was evil, but when you're a kid, that's
Yeah,
what
it's
you would,
scary.
I mean, it's naturally scary when you see something like that. And so I didn't see the heavy woman, but my two imaginary friends, and I figured it out today. When I was really tuning in to uh, the ones that I hung out with. I always used to walk around one of the names of the uh, imaginary friends, I started calling Nina. Now I
Huh.
didn't. Nina is a real name,
Yeah, right.
okay, and I didn't know why. I mean, that was the name was Nina. Well, I also didn't know. Now I lived in Miami. Nina is Latino descent. The name
Right.
is
Yeah.
actually found a lot in Cuba and other places like that.
So it's a common
So
name.
that, yeah, that
Yeah.
for them. So that made a lot of sense why I was
Okay.
calling the one Nina. Now I believe when I tuned in and did some, because now I work with my gifts and stuff like that. I believe that Nina, what the message I got is Nina was the daughter of the heavy woman with the shopping
Oh,
cart.
okay. By the
So
way,
I
that
played.
was the ghost of my son trying to
Okay.
trying to sneak around behind me to let the dog out on the balcony.
Okay, I only saw his arm, but I didn't know who it was.
No,
Another
you didn't
ghost
show up fully
coming
on the camera, but there was definitely like parts of things kind of moving around. Yeah, no worries. No
in.
worries.
No ghosts.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had to say something because we're on the topic and there's like stuff moving behind me, and it's like, okay, no, 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 that was just my kid.
It's not a ghost. Yeah, it's, just,
Yeah.
it's real life.
Anyway, continue.
So,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. So, that was what I was being told was that it was Nina was the daughter of the heavy woman with the shopping cart. So I get the sense. I'm trying to remember what it was when I did the. I was trying to. I want to say. I'm not sure, but I think the heavy woman, if I remember correctly, when I was tuning in, because I'm not tuning in right now. So if I
Right.
have it wrong, it's because I'm not
Yeah.
tuning in. I'm just trying to remember what I said. But I think I had mentioned it was something about heart, uh, had a sudden heart attack or something like
Oh.
that and passed away. And sometimes, when you pass away soon like that, it can,
Yeah. Now, I have a
the
question.
soul can be, not. To be gone.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard about
So,
that. Did you ever
yeah.
find out who lived in that house before you?
I never did, but I heard a rumor, and I don't know how I got heard this rumor because when I tried asking, either my family doesn't remember or something, or I heard it and nobody else did. But
Okay.
there was a rumor, and uh, the family that lived there prior to us, um, because after we sold the house, it
Nobody.
stayed abandoned for
Who did you sell it to? They never moved in?
nobody. If somebody moved in, they moved right back out, and then it
Oh,
just
wow.
really, when we saw it, when it was our later visit when I was a teenager and went back there, the bushes, everything was all
Oh,
overgrown
wow.
around it. It looked, just, is the word dilapidated, and all
Yeah.
it, and it
Yeah.
didn't look like the same place. It looked dark and everything. That was the thing, because when I was a little girl, the energy, I remember when I first walked in there, that's what it was. There was a heavy energy
Wow.
in this place. But like I said, I don't think all the spirits were bad, because even in haunted homes, when they feature on these shows and that, they find that you have ones that were innocent, that they're just, wandering the earth plane because, they don't either realize they're dead or they're not ready to be
Yeah.
dead, and so
Yeah.
it's sad, really.
Right.
So that was my first experiences, that, and then I had an unnatural fear.
Hmm.
Oh, I forgot to tell you what it was about. We were saying, I don't want to forget that. Rumor has it, or what I was told was that the previous owners practiced Santeria, but but they practiced it in a negative way,
Oh.
because Santeria is a religion as anything,
Okay.
but they had used it in a dark way.
Oh, wow.
So that was what I'd heard. Now I wouldn't have been
Interesting. Well, that makes
surprised because of
sense.
all the activity that was going on in that
Yeah.
house. Okay, so anyways, but I remember
How long did you live
um,
there, by the way?
um, till I was 10.
Oh, wow. So from 2
Mm-hmm.
to 10,
So
just
probably
about.
from about just I was just before turning 4.
Okay.
So I was probably about 3.5 years old up until 10 years old.
Why'd you guys move?
My parents said that they were tired of being in the city and just the traffic all the
Okay.
time. They didn't want that kind of life anymore. And Miami
Okay.
was starting to get a lot more crime.
Okay.
So, because my
That's
father was offered
reasonable.
a terrific, well, he was offered a very high position for Sears. He was offered a CEO job in Sears in Miami for the Miami
Mm-hmm.
division, but he passed it down,
Interesting.
even though the money and everything's, you know, you know,
Interesting. Now,
and I often wondered why did he do
yeah.
that? Because we wouldn't have had to. We could have lived somewhere, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I often wonder. I That makes me wonder.
Right.
Did something in that house have him absolutely terrified
Yeah.
that he had to
You know,
bolt?
considering, like you said, that that house was just abandoned and whoever lived in there moved out right away, I am sure, I mean, strangers, obviously, were not comfortable in
Yeah,
that place. I am sure your dad had experiences that he just was too afraid to
I am
talk
too.
about. That makes a lot of
I
sense.
am too. And I think that that would make a lot of sense as to why we bolted and went up into northern Florida, well,
Yeah.
northern central Florida.
Yeah.
Um, but that was what I was told. That's what he probably was saying because, for
Okay.
whatever reason, he didn't want to appear like then that would, because back in those times, that would appear then like you're weak.
Yeah. Right,
And
right.
so
Yeah.
rather than fess up and say, hey, I was dealing with things that were unknown, I can't, you know,
Yeah.
instead we'll say that. So although I do know that the traffic and everything was no fun getting, because Miami had these toll bridges and all that, and you'd be stuck and
Yeah.
waiting and all that. But I really don't think that that was the true reason. That's my honest opinion. Okay,
Yeah.
so then, as you can see, I'm dragging on this with this, so I don't want to do that because we only have so much time. So I started to get this unnatural fear about motorcycles, and I didn't know what it was, but people would automatically assume me being a child, oh, it's just the noise. But there was something
Mm.
more to it. I'm not saying that loud noises aren't scary to a kid, but then again, I went to fireworks and I was okay for the most part.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes if we were right up close, I was scared they were going to fall on us, but it really wasn't that. And I can remember it was me and my sisters, and we were walking to this store. It was called Great Value at the time, and they had a little alleyway road that you could take all the way straight, and then you'd be there at the park. And
Mm-hmm.
we like to go there to go and play at the playground because in those days kids could do that. You could wander around. It wasn't
Right.
like today,
Right.
you know. But there was a motorcycle that kept going up and down, racing, and I went into fear. I mean, sheer terror. And there was one of those quiet walls or something, but it was like
Okay. Like the
a
ones
boarded.
they put between the freeway and the houses, you mean?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it
Okay.
was like, yeah, a privacy wall, but it was the ones with the white boards going vertical.
Okay.
And I remembered that I climbed up it because I was just in panic mode. And my sisters couldn't understand what was wrong with me. And I was so terrified of this guy on the motorcycle. And so he had gone down a couple times down the alleyway. And then finally we made it to the park. I was relieved because I was so terrified of this guy on the motorcycle, but I didn't know why. And then everything changed. It was funny because we even had somebody who came and visited our home. And my mom was knocking on my door and said, oh, you want to come see so and so? He just got a motorcycle and that. And I was like freaking out. No, no, I didn't want to even see it.
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't even want to see it. And then one night I was with my sister and it was after dinner and we were sat out on the Florida porch. And all of a sudden I seen a physical manifestation. Well, I mean, I didn't know it was a physical manifestation at the
Mm-hmm.
time, but I saw a man standing outside our screen door and he had a motorcycle helmet right here, kind of cupped in his arm, and he had blood all over his jacket and that. And I mentioned something to my sister, and she even remembered me saying this, because we started having a conversation, and I said, "There's a man standing outside the window," and she, I guess, couldn't see him, and she said something about what does the man look like, or what is and I said to her, the man is dead.
Oh, dang.
She remembers that
Oh,
conversation
I
of
am
me saying that.
sure.
And after that, the fear was gone. That I had
Oh,
no more
wow.
visitations from that man with the helmet, and I was no longer afraid of motorcycles. That all just
Oh,
disappeared.
wow. Wow. Is that the only
Yeah.
time you've seen a dead person?
That was my most, what you call it, when I was a kid. Now I had
Okay.
other experiences as I got older,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
but that was it as a kid. And then, like I said, we had the other. Now my older sister swears up and down she saw a demon,
Ooh.
a demonic being on our. Now I never saw this, thank God,
Yeah.
but no, the demons came to me later, right? But she saw one. I didn't put it that way in the book. I was trying to be careful with how I was saying it, but um, she said that it was standing in the. We had like a two-step stairway that had an open stairway
Uh-huh.
that you'd be looking out on the living room, and my mom had painted a mural, big mural on the wall. But she said that the demon was standing on the stairway and going like this
Oh,
with his
jeez.
finger, and
And
she
this
said
was
it scared the hell out of her.
in the new house that she moved to, the one in northern Florida? Is that where this
No,
happened with? Oh, it was in the
this is
haunted
all in
house.
Miami.
Okay,
in,
gotcha,
in
gotcha,
Miami.
gotcha.
So this is what I'm saying. There was a mixture of um, spirits and activity. And even though I said I'm not going to talk about this, I'm just going to briefly mention this is when I had what I believe was my first real interaction with ETs,
Mm.
because I had a dream one night, or made to look like a dream. If anybody's watched the series Taken, this is
Yeah.
exactly, to me, what they do. And they want it to appear as a dream because whatever you're going to be put through might be traumatic, right?
Right, right.
That they need to do whatever. So this is a way to kind of ease your thoughts and to get a child to willingly come, right? I had dreamed when I was living in that house that we had, but we didn't, but we had, in my dream, I was fascinated with the inflatable rowboats that they had in the
Okay, yeah,
70s.
yeah,
They
yeah,
were
yeah.
kind of brown and tan, right?
Okay.
Kind of orange, tan, and brown, or whatever. And I, in this dream, I walked out of the house and down to the lake, and I really was so excited because I saw my grandmother sitting in this raft, this float. Okay. Now, my grandmother would never have done that,
Was she still alive at the time?
She was still alive, but she
Okay.
couldn't swim.
Okay.
She couldn't
Oh,
swim. So,
interesting.
yeah,
She was out on the lake in a boat. Okay.
yeah. That,
Huh.
from my understanding, anyways, from what my mom said, or she wouldn't have, I don't know if she couldn't swim or didn't like to swim. I don't know. I just remember too, growing up, I
Okay.
don't never remember my grandmother ever swimming or getting in the pool or anything. Like, we didn't have a pool, but like if we would go to the beach, and I don't ever remember my
Okay.
grandmother getting in the water. So, anyways, I go down to this float, and my grandmother sat there, and I get in this float that I'm just totally fascinated with. And instead of going around the lake, the float just lifts up
Oh,
and up and up.
wow.
And we go all the way up into space, and I'm looking at Earth, and it's getting,
Are you
you know,
serious?
smaller and smaller and smaller.
There was no
And
float.
yeah, so it definitely reminds me of the whole Taken bit, and
Interesting.
so that was one of my, and there's more to it, but again, we're trying to focus more on the paranormal. But I'm just saying there was
Yeah.
just so much activity going on with this
Right.
home, and so all this happens, and now people are gonna be like, "Where's that address?" Yeah, wanted to probably check that home out.
Oh, I'm sure.
I haven't been there in years, so I don't know. The last I saw it was abandoned and all overgrown and everything. But then I had this other friend, and I would put a clothes basket on my head. This
Yeah.
other imaginary friend, because kids do things like this. But sometimes, what kids probably don't realize or think is imaginary in that they are. I remember, even to this day, I get symbolic things
Okay.
done in metaphors and
Yeah. Well,
symbols. I get that all the time.
like the dream,
Yeah,
the float was actually a UFO. I
a
mean,
UFO. And
yeah,
that was not my grandmother. I'm
right,
sure of it. I
exactly.
think it was made to look like my grandmother.
So you'd be
You
comfortable.
know, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a, so, anyways, it with this person that I was pretending I was her.
Mm,
I called her with the clothes basket on my head, Mrs. Broken. Now, one would wonder, well, that's not a name or whatever, but it
yeah.
wasn't. It was symbology. And this was my first hints that I had intuition and that a lot of times spirits or whatever would present their things. Oh, excuse me. Hang on. I got to. Can you take over for a minute?
You know what?
Sorry.
I'm going to tell my story, my one and only paranormal story, while you do what you got to do.
Yay.
All right. So, this is the only time that I've ever seen what to me seemed like a ghost. So this was many, many, many years ago. The kid who just walked by here, he's now going to be 16 in a few months, and so he was a baby at the time. He was a toddler, actually, not quite a baby. But in any case, he was sleeping next to me in our bed, and I'm not sure what led to those circumstances because he had his own bed. But in any case, that particular night, he was sleeping right next to me, and I woke up because he was moaning in his sleep. He woke me up. He was, moaning pretty loudly, like he was having a nightmare or something like that. And so I opened my eyes, and what I saw was absolutely terrifying. Above him, horizontally, was this thing that really was maybe about 2, maybe 3 feet long because it wasn't standing up, it was just long. And it looked like a ghost, like you'd see in the Ghostbusters movies, with the wispy gray and all of that. And it had like these rags on it that were just sort of floating, and the head was oversized for his body. He actually had the proportions of a toddler, to be honest, just like, probably about the same size as my son was at the time. And it turned its head when it realized that I was awake, and it was just a skeleton head with these dark, hollow eyes. And the way it turned its head, it was like an unnatural movement. It was like over 90 degrees. It was freaky. It was freaky. And in my mind, I heard, "This is none of your business. Go back to sleep." And I honestly could not help myself. I rolled over and I immediately fell asleep. And even to this day, I'm like, how could I do that? I left my son, my baby, alone with this being that to me looked like a demon. I don't know what it was. I was not
Wow.
into, I had no understanding of ETs at the time. I had no interest in them. Like I said, this was many, many years ago, and my communications with ETs have only started in the last 5 years or so. So, in my frame of reference, it was a ghost because I knew about ghosts, but I didn't really know about ETs. I still don't know what it really was. I think the proportions of it, because a lot of people say that those little grays kind of look like toddlers, where they have a really big head. And the big black eyes. I could see how maybe what I saw wasn't exactly what was there, but I had this sense that to me it appeared malevolent. I'm not honestly sure if it really was. It could have been just because that's what I saw. But anyway, at the time, it really troubled me that this thing, I couldn't do anything about it. It rolled me over and it put me to sleep. So it could continue to do whatever it was doing with my son. So anyway, that's my
Wow.
one and only paranormal experience. And it wasn't a good one. I mean, to this day, I still think about how could I do that? How was I so easily controlled? And I wonder if that would still happen today when I'm
They
a
know
little
they
bit
know how to
self-aware.
do that. They find loopholes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That I have something that's going to really fascinate you.
Yeah.
I didn't want to share it yet because I didn't know uh, for sure if it happened in Miami in that house
Uh
or if
huh.
it happened in Fruitland Park. So that's why I had to hold off on that. But before I do, let me finish my story. Okay. So I believe that because that was probably when I was first not understanding or realizing how my gifts were and that my intuitive gifts. So this is a really interesting topic, right? It's understanding, well, what gifts do I have?
Oh yeah.
And that finding out what gifts you have, because we all have intuitive abilities, but a lot of people turn, if you shut yourself off to it and that, you're not going to get it, and
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to enhance these things. But we all have it. It's just whether you turn that switch on or you turn it off, you know?
Right.
Okay. So getting back to the story, what happened was, I later tuned into this when I was writing about my life because I got a book coming out on my life, and there's actually going to be a 2-page feature next month in Parahouse magazine, all about me with my crazy experiences of my life because I
Cool.
have loads. Okay, and this woman, I believe, when I tuned in later as an adult hearing that,
You mean Mrs.
was the
Broken?
broken
Mrs.
Mrs.
Broken?
Broken.
Okay.
It was a symbol that, um, okay, Nina, as we know, is a daughter.
Yeah.
I think that the heavy woman with
With the
the
shopping
shopping
cart?
cart that my brother picked up, I picked her up, but in a different way. And I feel like she was sad. And so she was broken inside because, you
Okay.
know, she was around her daughter and that, but both of them are in a stuck place. That is what I get with all
Wow.
of this. So when I tuned into everything,
Interesting.
and that at the time that's what I think they, when I look back on it, that's what I think what it was. And because why? For a child is going to be easier to communicate with and not,
Yeah.
you know, dismiss them,
Right.
because
Well,
children are more
in
open
tune.
minded.
That's right. Yep. That's very,
So
very true. Huh. So,
So
did you.
not everything was dark in that house, you
Right.
know. But
Isn't that
unfortunately,
interesting?
these were sad spirits.
It's
Yeah.
interesting how we perceive them just based on our own conditioning. And so, like, your
Right.
brother was
Because you're
totally
taught
freaked
that.
out. Your brother was totally freaked out, but you didn't perceive her that way. And it's the same like with this
Right.
little whatever that thing was. I was afraid of it, so I perceived it as something dangerous, but it might not have been.
Exactly. Well, we are conditioned with that, and then religion is a big thing where,
Yeah,
anything that, doesn't look like us and talk like us, is evil.
yeah,
So that's the whole, constant fear mongering. I can't stand, a lot of religions do is they fear monger with that stuff,
yeah. Well, it's a
and
good way to control the masses. So,
I mean, yeah, because what is another thing they say about ETs? A lot of them say, oh, they're fallen angels.
oh yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah,
Because we are the only ones in the entire universe and everything else, it has to be, give me a break.
yeah,
Because only we too could be godly, not anything else. The violent people killing with guns and
yeah,
we are the godly ones and they are the, give me a break. Get
yeah.
off your high horse with that.
Right.
I'm sorry, but I can't help but feel like that, that superiority BS. So, I think we can learn a lot. Now, there are ETs that do feel they are so superior to us, definitely. But I mean, I just can't stand anybody, whether it's a human or an ET, feeling that they are better than someone else. Because in the end, on the spiritual plane, and that we're all equal, nobody's better than anybody. I don't care if it's, whatever famous star, what's that guy called, old Blue Eyes there? I can't think of his name, or Michael Jackson or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
they aren't, there's this thinking, especially I see it with stars, and they think that, well, there's something special or different about them. BS. Because if we have many lives and that, you're not going to be that famous star in the next life. You're
Yeah.
going to be, because it's all about evolving of the souls. And no, you're not going to be always the one in control. And no, you're not going to always have leadership roles. Doesn't work that way. But anyways, I'm getting off topic here, but I just wanted to express that because I have no idea, but I felt like putting that in there. But again, it goes back to about the fear mongering and assuming that
Yeah.
everything is dark. that we see. That's what it came off of. So sorry,
Hmm.
I took it out on a
No, that's
tangent
okay.
there.
It needed to be said. I know that we are joined by beings that we don't see during these podcasts because I've had quite a
Yes,
few
I
confirmations
think
that
so
we're not
too.
alone doing this thing. So, I think some of them actually whisper in our ear some of the
Yeah.
things that they want us to talk about. And
And
I'm okay with
I'm
it.
actually getting that right now. I'm being told to remind about the video that I just made about hanging on to bad energy, hanging on to, when
Yeah.
you're not recognizing, you can bring that. If you've got these dark thoughts and that, you need to sit and take a moment and think, are these thoughts my own, or are these,
Mm,
you know somebody's trying to manipulate? Because if it is somebody that's trying to manipulate, and that, you need to, you know I mean, you're not going to say in a loud room, I cast you out now, if you're in
right,
public
right, right.
somewhere. But you can
Telepathically,
telepathically
yeah.
say, you know I'm not going to own these thoughts. You are not going to, change my energy or my frequency and manipulate the situation. You need to leave now. So I
Yeah.
just felt like I needed to put that out there, because sometimes what happens too is when people, now, not everything is that we are asking for it in that, because there is dark beings out
Hmm.
there, just like there is light beings. But especially like when we're talking about spirits, or anything like that, if the energy starts to shift and you start finding yourself just getting more and more angry,
Hmm.
and that, take a moment to see if maybe it could be even like a darker spirit, somebody who wasn't happy in this life, and
Yeah.
they're projecting
Right, right. Well,
their own.
it takes a certain level of self-awareness to be able
Yes.
to recognize that. But I mean, even just contemplating the idea that some of the negative things that we hang on to are not necessarily, don't have their source may not necessarily be within ourselves. We're just sort of
Right.
getting in sync with the lower vibrations of another
Exactly.
being, and then that's what starts happening as we engage in these negative behaviors. But
And then
yeah,
that, and in turn, what happens is it kind of snowballs. This is what I was explaining in my video. And then you
yeah,
can actually attract negative beings
yep,
in your space. Just because you might not be able to see them, but they're there, and they're causing all kinds of.
right,
And it's funny, because that's what I think is kind of um, happening on a planet level with Earth and everything. It was funny that when I made that video, and me with the whole Egyptian thing and
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
connection. For those of you who might not know who this god, they call him, was a god, a dark god, a malevolent god, his name was Apep. And Apep is the god of
right,
chaos.
right,
Okay. And from my, um, I'm not saying that I'm all correct or anything like that. I'm just saying for what I believe. If you don't believe it, it's fine, but you're also not going to force me to believe that, what you believe is correct. I'm
right.
talking about people out there.
It's
But,
just
but I'm going to
different
give
perspectives. All it is just different perspectives.
perspectives, right? And I always say you can agree to disagree. But I believe that, I wholeheartedly believe, and because you felt him,
Oh yeah.
Sobek was a good being. But unfortunately, Apep hated him with a vengeance, because if you look up in the actual history that is in the history, uh, Sobek, and Ra were very close. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, and I don't believe Ra was anything dark or anything like that.
No, he was a sun
Apep,
god.
yeah, and Apep was very dark, and Apep hated Ra. And
Yeah.
Sobek was very close with Ra. Okay. And the message that I got was Apep wanted Renanudit, but Renanudit went with Sobek. Okay.
Okay.
Renanudit was the cobra headed goddess. Apep was
He's a
was also a snake
yeah,
god.
he's a
He was a
snake. Yeah.
serpent.
Right.
So when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So a lot of times what he would do, and this was the message I got, sometimes, and it says this in the actual history, he would appear with a croc head instead of a a
Right.
snakehead.
Pretending to be
Now, what
Sobek.
you or pretending to be Sobek, and he would also, what I got was that he would mock him with the military thing. Well, it also said that Apep fought with Ra every day. Go to
Interesting.
battles. Go to battle. So there was
Interesting.
a whole thing with the military thing. But the thing is I just wanted to bring that up because I felt this about having to speak on that for a minute about the energy, and then we'll get back to the story with the paranormal. Because it also ties in with the fact that you were mentioning that automatically we are programmed to assume that anything that doesn't look like us, doesn't act like us, is automatically going to be evil. And
Right. We
that
should be afraid
when
of it. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
to be afraid of it. And that's such not a good way and especially to instill in our kids in that, because I think that when you're with the right ETs and things like that, you could get very um, invaluable information or things that will help your child or whatever. And I know that, I mean, there's our
Yeah.
traumatic experiences with ETs. I'm not saying that, but I'm thinking that the good ones and that want to interact in that could really help, especially a child like me. I was going through all kinds of stuff, you know,
Yeah.
um,
It's
and
good to
that would have
stay
helped.
open. It's good to
Yeah,
stay
because
open and
I was
not
going through
come
all
to
kinds of stuff with the
conclusions.
paranormal, not
Right.
with ETs. But if I would have had that connection like that, because that was one of the best experiences of my life, was going up into that raft. It was not dark experience at all. It was beautiful, and seeing the planet and everything. And I felt loved and warmed and
Yeah.
embraced.
Right.
So, and I wanted more of that. And I think it might have been because I was seeing all this stuff. So let me get to this next story. I just talked with my mom when she was coming out here, and this is why I say why it's good to have your kids, with an understanding and not just shoo them off and say, oh, you're imagining it. Telling them that it's imagined. Oh, there's, laughing at the kid and saying, oh, no, there's monsters on your bed, and kind of mocking them and that. And
Yeah.
I think that's yeah, I mean, we do it because we don't want our kids to be freaked out, but I think that we got to come up with a better solution with that,
Yeah.
instead of just writing off anything they have and then forcing them to sleep in a dark room, and that when there could be something in there,
That's
that's
true.
just my opinion.
That's
That's
true.
my opinion. So then what happens is my mom just, this is a story, it's really creepy. My uncle, this was before I was born, I had an uncle that committed suicide.
Oh.
And he had, oh gosh, it's really bad. He had a gun, and I
Okay.
guess my grandparents were arguing a lot all the time. And
Hmm.
so he said, I've had enough of this. That's according to what my mom said. I guess that my dad said, because she wasn't there, I guess, when it happened. But he walked into the bedroom, shut the door, and basically
Oh,
blew his head
jeez.
off.
Oh, my goodness.
And and
Oh, wow.
he was young, probably like 18 or something at the time.
Oh, you gotta be
And
kidding.
no, yeah, he was young.
Oh,
And
wow. That's so sad.
my yeah, and my what gets even worse. So this is why I think too with my dad, with having his fears, and that it's so understandably why he
Hmm.
would, because he and his brothers were sent afterwards by the dad to go in there and clean up the mess, and the bits of the brain and everything are all
Oh, your dad had to clean that up? And that was his
with his
brother.
brother,
Oh, my
with his
gosh.
brothers, and he had like this.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
his other three brothers. So
That is traumatic just thinking about it.
yeah, yeah. So
Holy
my
cow.
mom thinks, but I really don't think that this is who it was. Now, I do know that when someone passes away like that, it can bring in dark, because if their head's in a dark
Yeah,
space when they
right.
do that. But I don't think that it would have been in the house in Miami. It was just that there was, I think it was a poor, I think I mean, this is just my personal belief, but I don't think that that's who she was experiencing. So,
Okay.
anyways, one night she said in the room, she couldn't wake my dad, and this black thing was going around the bed. I think she said it was black or something. I've got it in the book, but it was going,
Wow.
and she said it just scared the heck out of her, and she couldn't wake my dad up for nothing. And that,
Oh my
and
goodness. What did she
it was
do?
just going all around the room, and that I don't know. I'd have to talk to her more on that. But that is one of the things I put in the book. But I found out because I wanted to make sure before I brought that up. Did that happen in Miami, or
Right.
did it happen in Fruitland Park? Because we had stuff happen in Fruitland Park, but nowhere near to the extent of what the things that were going on in Miami in
Right.
that home. And well, for them, I did. My only all that happened for me was stuff just increased,
Right.
but
Right.
nobody else was having it. And she said no, it was Miami in that house.
Wow. Yeah, I can definitely see there's a lot of evidence pointing to this idea that there was a portal there, and it sounds like a lot of the lower level beings were showing themselves to, you guys who were living there. You were probably picking up on the positive ET. Well, not probably, clearly you did. But I'm wondering if the
Yeah.
rest of your family only was aware of some of the, lower frequency entities for
Yeah,
whatever reason.
yeah. The only things I've ever heard my family mention have been the negative
Interesting.
ones, but I experienced both when I was there, and that's when my
Yeah.
sleep paralysis. When I recognized when I was started having the sleep paralysis, I was having conversations in my sleep and that, and I'd have these paralysis events. And then as I got older, and we moved up to Fruitland Park, so I was 10, we moved up.
All right, I
That's
don't want to.
when
I don't want to cut you off. I'm just letting you know we have about 4 minutes left.
Okay. Actually, I was going to get ready to cut this close, but we've got some pictures on show. This is from today, and I can always do another. We can always do another show later, and I can talk about my Fruitland Park experiences because I had all kinds of stuff happen there too. I was the only one though,
Yeah, I'm going to bring this
pretty
one
much.
up. I'm going to share this picture. Actually, I'm going to share. Hang on, just a second. I'm going to share the one that I think you can say the most about because I really want to share this picture, and I don't want us to run out of time.
Right.
So hang on a second because this is really pretty trippy. Excuse me.
It was trippy when it happened.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Oh,
So
that's the second one. That's the
yeah,
night vision, but okay.
but you can kind of see how this little light bulb here is lit up, and all
Yeah.
the other ones are not.
Right. And the power was off.
And the power was off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
What
it
I want to
wasn't.
explain is my daughter, she wanted, for whatever reason, wanted to sleep with me that one night. But this has been happening like a lot, and I had gotten used to it. But my daughter, it freaked her out because it wouldn't. I would shut the lights off, go to bed, and it would only start occurring probably around 2 or 3 in the morning after the power's been off for a while, and this one bulb would just start to slowly lighten up, and it
That
freaked
is
my
so
daughter out,
creepy.
and she was like, "Are you awake?" And I was, yeah, and she says, "Mom, that is freaking weird." She was saying she couldn't get over how this bulb was just slowly starting to light up, and there was no power on. So that's
That
the
so
second
she
with the night
was
vision.
she was in your room. She was in the room with you when this happened.
Yes, but it was happening to me by then. It had been happening to me like every
Right.
night.
But
This
she
was
got
going
to
on
see
for
it.
like at least 2 months,
Huh. Yeah, I'm just
and
messing
then it
around
just
with the
stopped.
filters here just to see if anything else pops up. Because sometimes you get to see other things around that we don't
I would be curious
normally
to know,
see.
I'll tell you.
Yeah. But it's kind of hard to tell what all is in there. Like I don't know what this thing is down here in the corner. It looks
I
like
don't
a
know.
I don't know, looks like a shadow or something. I'm not quite sure what that is. Was this a piece of furniture or something here?
Oh, that could be. I have a hanging
Okay.
candle light thing, candles thing. So that
Gotcha.
could be what that is.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this whole story with the light bulb, I think, is pretty spectacular. And the fact that another person got to witness this with you is, and you have a picture,
Yeah.
you know.
It freaked her out
Oh, I
because she
bet.
was watching it. I said, "Welcome to my world." Yes, this has been happening every night. I'd love for you to show the other picture because that was with night vision on. But
Okay.
the reason why this other picture is important is because I want to show that if it was normal like power stuff or and that the rest of the room was not lit up.
Right.
All you see
Is this the one
the
you mean?
bulb. Uh,
Or the other
yeah, I
one
mean, it's
that's
you kind
smaller?
of. I think this is another one that's kind of got the night vision on. Although
Okay,
that
let
looks
me.
like an orb, but I don't know
No,
if
that
that's
was
my.
just a light bulb. Hang on, let me get
Oh,
this
okay.
other one going. Hang on, just a second.
Yeah, that's your. You know what that I'm seeing is your thing in the background, the circles.
Oh, okay. Here we go. I think this is the one that you're referring to.
Yes.
Is this the one?
Okay, so
Okay.
if you look in this picture, it's completely black. So the only thing that's lit
Right.
is the
Is the
bulb
light bulb.
itself. If it was power and that if you had light, the rest of the room would be lit, or at least wouldn't be lit as much as when you have all three all of them
Yeah.
working.
Right.
But it would still you'd be able to see around the room. It wouldn't be pitch black and all you see is that because that
That's
was all that lit up.
that's trippy. Holy cow. And these little dots
And
right here, these are just they're just
the
reflections
the
from the rest of the
from
fan.
the other blades in there, but that was the weird thing. But it wasn't just that it because it didn't just like pop on all of a sudden. It was that it was just slowly light
Oh
up and
wow.
then
How long did
it
it stay lit up?
um gosh, it wasn't like the whole night or something like that. I think it was more like oh gosh, it's starting to rain out here. I hope I don't get all wet. It was I'd say this was happening every night. I don't really know for how long the light was because I was tired because it would be,
So
late at
you would
night.
fall asleep.
But yeah,
Interesting.
but it did freak me out the first time it happened. I kind of got the heebie-jeebies, even though I am somebody who was so used to. I
Yeah.
mean, I've seen physical manifestations of demonics on, but we're gonna have to save for another show because I didn't have time to. That was one later when we lived in the well, in one of my houses
Okay. Right.
after moving up this way.
Well, we got to wrap it up because we've gone over a couple of minutes, but we will be back next week with more stories and conversations about ETs and the paranormal. We're really going to get
Yeah,
into it. I have some artwork that I could probably share, and you or just have so many
nice.
stories. So many stories. So for now,
Yeah.
bye, you guys. We'll see you next
Bye.
week. Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye.
Bye.